What, from a big picture perspective, do you hope to accomplish, man?
For me, it's almost like the Robin Hood effect because of the rebates and things that are tied to these drugs and these large corporations that have created, in a sense, a monopoly in the industry. How can we take some of that power away and give it back to the people that we serve?
Hey, what's up, guys? Spencer Smith here, host of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast, sponsored by Pareto Health, ClaimDoc, and PlanSight. Enjoy today's episode. Well, let's get started. Jack, I'm here with Jack Crotty, right?
Yep.
You are the Director of Business Development for Adyptation.
Yep.
Nice to meet you, man.
Nice to meet you as well. Thanks for having me.
I appreciate you. We were just coming down, or you were just coming down from Ohio. We were talking about life in Ohio.
Yep.
Jack, we'll get your backstory, all that good stuff here in a second, but why don't you position for everybody today real quick, what does Adyptation do?
So at its core, Adyptation really leans into those with specialty disease.
Okay.
So we help source drugs a different way and then kind of hold those members' hand through the journey towards the path of remission. And ultimate goal is containing costs and helping people be healthy.
Cool. So specialty medication we'll focus on. We'll focus on the sourcing of those medications, laying on a clinical perspective and coaching and counseling through that as well.
Correct.
And then we're going to talk wearables and data tracking and all that good stuff. So hopefully this will be an exciting one for folks. But before we get into kind of the substance of the conversation, I want to get to know you real quick. Obviously we did that over coffee, but let the audience get a chance to do that. So tell us your backstory, Jack, where you're from, all that good stuff, your career, et cetera.
Yeah, so from Dayton, Ohio, and got a wife, 2 kids, a boy and a girl. Been in the insurance industry for about 10 years. Spent my time on the carrier side, spent about 7 years at a broker. And then after that, decided that I wanted to focus on maybe how I can help in a different way.
Okay.
Noticed that there were some areas inside of the industry that could be done differently. So wanted to jump on board with some companies that had kind of an innovative mindset. So spent some time at a startup healthcare company, and then ultimately here at Adyptation.
Well, so did you find yourself, was the broker world straight out of school or no?
No.
Okay. So what did you do prior to that? I think you said, was that IMED? Okay.
Yep.
So
I
you
was
were
at IMED for about 2 years.
Coverage,
Yep.
right? Okay.
Vision care, yeah. So I was on the account management side there.
Okay.
Learned pretty quickly that I'm not an account manager, not organized enough for that.
Yeah.
No, but I learned a lot in my time there. Obviously had to get certified and all that in the industry, which was helpful. But learned kind of the dynamics of different companies, different brokers, how different people operate. And then when I went to the broker side, we were kind of regionally focused, but learned pretty quickly that I love the sales side of things.
Okay.
Really loved.
They give you an opportunity for production when you moved over there? Okay, right. So you were probably, 24, 25 at the time, something like that?
When I went to the broker side, I was 27.
27, okay.
Yeah.
But so the reason I ask is obviously that is that is a role that a lot of times agencies will sort of build people up and pour into them, fresh, whether they're fresh out of college or a couple years experience. But talk to me about the experience yourself of being 27 years old and going out and selling, benefits, services and things like that. Was it easy to pick up for you? Did it take some time to build momentum? Talk to me about the
Definitely took
experience.
some time.
Okay.
I think this industry there's so many different elements to it. Mm-hmm. So it's really easy to pick up, on kind of the main players in the game and lean into those. So from a medical coverage standpoint. But then over time you start diving in more and more and you see everything that's out there and trying to discern, what's good for a particular client. And I kind of took a step back and thought, I want to learn more about the people that I'm serving.
Okay.
To try to bring them the best option. So kind of rather than looking at it as I need to learn every single thing about every single thing, it's I need to learn what's best for the people that I'm serving.
So listening to your clients, figuring out their needs. Now,
Yeah.
were you a consultant as well, right? So you were obviously selling services, but so you were staying on board and consulting.
Yep.
Did you find yourself over time gravitating towards any particular solutions or maybe self-funding or what are the things that as you started to dig in, learn that you were attracted to learning more about? Pareto Health is the manager of the largest employee benefits group captive in the United States. And it's also now the main sponsor of the Self-Funded with Spencer podcast. I chose to partner with Pareto Health for three main reasons. Number one, their dedication to improving the world of health benefits. Number two, their mission to reduce volatility and to make self-funding simple for mid-sized employers. And number three, the strength and scale of their program. With over 2,300 member groups and more than $1 billion of stop-loss premium under management, Pareto Health is the most robust solution of its kind in the country, period. Stay tuned for more information because I'm sure I'll be featuring them on an episode of the podcast very soon. Visit Pareto Health at paretohealth.com or follow them on LinkedIn to stay up to date on the latest news and developments.
You know, I like the self-funded space. The thing that I think always piqued my interest about that was the flexibility that allows. When you're fully insured, you're stuck with what you've got.
Yep.
And in the self-funded side, you can really lean in and be creative and bring different solutions to those clients. And that's when I really started recognizing, okay, there's some lapses here that I think I want to lean into and try to learn more and figure out how I can make even more of an impactful difference on those people. And unfortunately, I think on the broker side, your hands are tied a bit.
Yeah, you were mentioning that over coffee, and I understand some of the constraints working in there, but was it too limited in scope of what you could do, or working one employer at a time? Because I think you mentioned wanting to kind of have a broader influence or broader ability to impact people. What was it that you found limiting about the consulting world?
Really, it's at no fault of their own. There's so many kind of next best things out there in the market that they have to put some walls up and really try to figure out, okay, what's legitimate and what's not.
Yeah.
And I felt, I could see something that I thought might be a good solution, but it couldn't be implemented or couldn't be implemented as quickly as I would want because it needed to kind of go through the process of approval and things like that.
Yeah, I think, I can understand that perspective. I've sold into agencies for a decade or so. Like, there are things that you look at and you go, this would work. I know this will work.
Right.
But it doesn't mean it gets deployed, right? Whether
Totally.
the employer's not ready for it, maybe like you said, there's a time constraint, there's a capacity constraint or something on the consulting side that even though it does rise to the occasion, like we should do this,
right,
there are other influences obviously that prevented it. Totally. That can be frustrating at times. I totally get that. But also I think from the business owner's perspective, the people that are running that agency, you got to keep the lights on, you got to keep people employed. You maybe sometimes gravitate towards things definitely work for the problem at hand.
Right.
And so you lean into those things that you've got experience with, because there's a risk, I guess, if you go and chase something and it seems exciting and it doesn't work out, right, now you feel like that reflects poorly on you, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay, so you decided after what, a 7-year track record or so, that you wanted to go into the startup world. And I know obviously that one ultimately didn't pan out, but talk to me about life at a startup versus life at an agency prior to it.
Man, I tell you, it's not something that I ever thought that I would be a part of. And after now a little over a year being in it, I love it. It's you have to be able to bob and weave and be creative, and like no day is the same. It's really, for me, taking ownership in something and growing something and leaning in and just knowing that at the root of why X company was founded was for the right reason. Yeah. And you're a part of that. I really take pride in kind of taking ownership in that. There's obviously a lot of uncertainty in the startup world. Sure. A lot of risk involved in that. And I mean, that's conversations that I had to have with my wife about, okay, is this something we want to take a risk and jump into
the
this?
previous one you were at before Adyptation ultimately didn't survive, right?
Yeah. So they're still around, but they had to
scale back.
Yeah.
Well, and that's the risk of a startup. I was telling you, I experienced not that exactly, but I went to a startup prior to Pareto Health, and still fortunately made it, and I got to see it built in real time. But you go from very large company to new company, and you realize like how much work needs to be done to actually build an organization and actually even get your product or whatever your solution is fully market ready and being able to adapt to all the challenges that the market actually introduces. It's one thing like to create a concept. It's another thing to actually deploy it and then have it work and then see all the variables that you didn't see. You know, you got to experience it all. It was like getting a in the field MBA essentially. Totally. And so I wouldn't trade it for the world. It was incredibly influential in my career. But you didn't leave. It's funny, you didn't go back. You didn't revert back to the safety net after that. So how come?
You know, I'm sick, twisted. I don't know.
Masochistic maybe, right? Yeah.
No, I loved it.
Okay.
So even though the ultimate result wasn't what I was hoping for, there's something about this space that just it pulled me in. Mm-hmm. I think also being at a startup, it allows you to be a disruptor in the industry. Mm-hmm. I think our industry is craving some disruption, needs it, and my former employer and Adyptation both, I think, deliver on some disruptive services, and I'm excited about what.
Well, it's cool. I applaud you for continuing down the path, right? I mean, not kind of reverting back to the known quantity in the broker world or whatever to continue, because obviously you believed in the mission. So let's kind of slide in now, if you will, to Adyptation and what you guys do. I know you summarized it a moment ago, but I'm going to dig in now and we'll kind of ask some questions and position it and all those good things. Sure. But what was it initially that attracted you to what they were doing and why you decided to go work for them? Yeah,
so I actually met Ryan, our founder, probably 6 or 7 years ago. He came and talked to me, and at the time in the industry, I was pretty new. I couldn't fully understand really the value and what he was trying to accomplish. I was just too new, and we kept in touch over the years, and we got in contact between my former employer and Adyptation, and I asked him kind of where they're at now. Mm-hmm. And
so 5 or 6 years ago, it was in its infancy. Then he was building it this whole time, right? Yep. And so you came back to him and said, "All right, where are you guys?" And it sounded like it was getting some traction, right?
Yep, okay. Totally. I think they realize their area of focus and the value that they can bring to people, and that's really at the core. My total mission is I just want to help people, and what they're doing and what they set out to do is just that.
Well, didn't you say it was a pretty cool origin story? It was, was he Ryan in the Air Force or something like that?
So he came out of the Air Force Research Lab, developing technology for fighter pilots, and then thought about how can we bring this to everyone, or at least some type of. The technology is pretty.
So what you say, it was like a wearable where it was detecting like their sweat and
like
their
measuring
response
like stress
to stress.
For fighter pilots.
That's crazy.
Yeah, wild. So he's much smarter than I am, but he recognized that there's got to be a way that we can take at least a part of this technology and apply it to everyone. And really, what we have leaned into with that side of things is, how can we help people with specialty disease manage their disease better? And a lot of that has to do with activity and sleep and diet. And so now we've taken that technology, applied it to like a Fitbit or a Ring, things like that, the wearable device. Mm-hmm. And then it's kind of an accountability tool for those people to see, okay, I do need more sleep.
When you said early stages, they were focusing a lot on the wearable technology itself, but now that you came in, and I guess did they have a salesperson prior to you joining? No. Okay. So you were their first really sales hire.
Yep.
So what did distribution, what did the conversations look like prior to having somebody dedicated to sales? Because it's usually that's founder-led sales at that point, right? And they're not necessarily sales and benefits people, right? They were technology. And so talk to me about kind of pre-Jack and now what maybe you're doing differently than they did prior.
So a lot of what the sales approach looked like prior to me was leveraging their network out inside of the Air Force and those contracts and things like that. Kind of the who do you know that we should know conversation.
Yeah.
And there was some positive momentum that came from that. Obviously, bringing me in was a totally different perspective. Coming from the benefit space, being a broker, having startup sales experience for a health plan, understanding the needs and kind of understanding how to talk to brokers differently that they didn't have prior. So they were doing what they knew how to do, and they were doing it well, but they recognized that in this industry, we had to lean into the brokers.
Well, there's a natural ceiling, right? I mean,
Totally.
they probably did a very effective job. And there's something about when a founder tells a story early on. There's a guy I've had on the podcast before named TK Cater, and he's a SaaS founder, multiple SaaS founder, and then he coaches other ones. And one of the things that I've heard him say, but I've recognized myself, is like, you'll get to a certain point by the founder telling the story because they know the product intimately, they understand why they developed it and what they set out to do. But eventually you're going to reach a ceiling where somebody that's skilled at selling to whoever your distribution channel ultimately is going to be required to get to that next level. And you and I both know that the art of selling into brokers and consultants is a much different thing than just open market or direct to consumer sales. Like, it's a specific buyer persona, and the narrative and the way that you position it is different as well. So they bring you in to achieve that end. So obviously I think you've been there about 5-6 months now. How have you reformed kind of their narrative or the sales process? What have you layered into the equation? I'd love to hear your perspective on that.
So really we have a big emphasis on obviously the broker space. And how we do that is kind of step by step. So we're new in most people's eyes. So we have kind of the initial introduction. This is who we are. Education sessions, kind of taking deeper dives into how we can apply in different scenarios. And then really the ultimate goal is allowing that broker to put us in front of their clients. Or the broker allowing us to be in front of their clients. And I mean, they're getting inundated with so many different things. They have to know, they being the broker, have to know everything about everything. And I don't think it's even fair to the broker to understand every nuanced detail about adaptation. So know enough to bring me to the table, and then let them hear it straight from the horse's mouth.
Absolutely.
So they can ask the questions and really understand how we can benefit them and their people.
Well, and I've been always in the mindset, and the next question I'll ask you, let's start digging into the product itself and position the solution. But I've been of the mindset for a very long time that the better you educate somebody on what you do, the more likely they are to buy. Like, so rather than pushing or selling, it's like, find out who you believe needs this, right? Who would benefit from it. Identify that buyer first. Then when you've identified them correctly, then you go educate them. It's a natural conclusion for them to say, I need that, right? And so some of it is a skill and sort of qualifying, but the other side is just, if you lean in and put an emphasis on the education itself, the product or solution will eventually sell itself because you've identified the right buyer first. So let's talk about the solution then, because the way you described it earlier, it feels like there's 3 legs to the stool, but I'll let you sort of describe it in totality. But the way that I understand it, at least, is there's a sourcing component to it. There is a kind of a clinical component to it, and then there's a data and tracking. So how would you describe, if we were going to go back to this onset of the podcast, how would you describe what you do? And then I'll let you go down whichever path from there. Yeah,
so it's really, from the employer perspective, kind of unique in that we cater to the full C-suite, including the Chief Human Resources Officer. So it's the part of what we do that really, I think, piques the interest of a CFO and CEO is that pharmaceutical sourcing side. That's day one savings for the employer. So we're sourcing those specialty drugs a different way, which then step 2 subsidizes the clinical platform, which is where you start seeing the HR folks kind of
perk up a little bit.
What do you mean? Now there's support on the back end too for those people. And then in that clinical side, there's the tech component built into that. So really, I think the day one savings is huge. And it's sometimes pretty drastic savings from the pharmacy side. But really, what I call kind of the meat and potatoes behind what we do is the clinical component. So you have a person with RA, for instance.
So I want to make sure, rheumatoid arthritis, right?
You've got them kind of navigating on their own today, that disease, and really they need help understanding their disease, understanding the importance of taking their medication, then understanding other factors that take place in life. So understanding that they need to have movement when some days it might be easier said than done for those folks. So the clinical side, we bring in PharmDs, so clinical pharmacists, that understand how the prescriptions and these drugs interact with the human body. Because some of them actually the symptoms that come along with taking that drug are not great.
Yeah.
So people get turned off of wanting to even take those drugs. But they step in and kind of take them by the hand and say, what's the next best step we can take? Again, what's the next best step we can take? Okay, we do this. Okay, what's the next best step? So it's taking small baby steps down the path towards remission, which is the ultimate goal for those people.
So counseling and coaching being
Totally.
layered in. So I want to, before we go too far down the weeds there, I want to talk about the sourcing, because sourcing is something I've covered before. I actually told you, believe it or not, it just coincidentally, Sharks, their episode came out today, which, you even said you can work with those guys. I was thinking maybe you were competitive, but you can work with them. But let's talk about sourcing as a category, because I don't think I've fully spent a whole episode on what it means to source drugs from overseas. What are the challenges? What are the opportunities? What do the savings look like? And then even, I know this isn't, your entire business model isn't predicated on the sourcing. It just is a way to fund what you guys really do. But I want to talk about sourcing for a second. So where are you sourcing these drugs from typically?
99.9% is from Canada.
From Canada. Okay. Okay. And you mentioned specialty before. So it's a focus on specialty drugs only. What is it about sourcing from Canada? It's just the savings, right? The ability to save money? Okay. And what, are we seeing 2, 3, 4x savings? I mean, I know it varies by drug.
Yeah, it varies.
Okay.
I mean, there's been some instances where they're saving 30% on their total pharmacy spend.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. And so you get them from Canada. What does the process look like for a member to be able to receive that drug from Canada?
So first off, they have to talk with the doctor in Canada that's affiliated with our sourcing partner. After they have that conversation, the doctor approves it. Within 30 hours, that drug will be at that member's doorstep. Okay. Because a lot of these have cold chain and temperature controlled and all that, so it's very important that they get them to their door in a short amount of time. And that's a 90-day supply for that member too. Okay. So they have to talk to a doctor, but they get the same drug. They get it within 30 hours. And it's the exact same drug, right? So there's no, I have to compromise or anything like that. Okay. So the sourcing as a model is something I've heard before, and it's been around, but you said this is really just a way for you guys to fund stool leg number 2, which is the clinical side. Okay. So how does that sort of pay for, if you will, stool leg 2? Yeah. So the savings that the employer would experience from the pharmacy savings, we take a portion of that to fund the clinical side. So really $700 of that. So say the drug's $2,000, that employer would pay $2,700 for that drug, which, I mean, what we've seen in most cases is they're already paying $3,500 for said drug. Okay. So there's still a savings applied even with that. Yeah, but prior to that, even if there's still a savings, they're overpaying and they're not getting any oversight, right? Correct. It's just getting the drug for the member. Correct. Right? So are you seeing that you're actually, some of these employers or maybe the consultants are designing incentives to get the member engaged to want to do this in the first place? Do you have plan design incentives and things? Yeah, I mean, I think conversations that we've had a lot with the brokers is, we got to take steps to incentivize these people to move. And one way that we help doing that is, so the drug for the member is $0. Okay. There's no copay for that member. So pretty big incentive right there. And then obviously, you've got different options. I mean, you think of things like smoking cessation or compliant, non-compliant rate for if you fall under this category, you have to do this. So some employers are mandating it. I think they should. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, it's a conversation between us, the broker, and the employer, and developing whatever feels most, I think, culturally beneficial to the employer. Yeah, I mean, not everybody likes a mandate, right? Totally. Even if the mandate is to my benefit, I might still be like, I don't want you mandate me doing this. I want to go down to CVS and get my drug, right? I get that. But I think if positioned properly, and I was really digging in with you, it's like the employer saves money, the member saves money, they get the exact same drug. All they have to do is hop on a phone call, every 3 months with a Canadian doctor to make sure that is done. There's no downside really, other than, I guess for some reason the drug didn't show up for some reason because there was a supply chain issue, but I'm sure that's rare or non-existent. So then how could you even make the argument against a mandate? But all right, so let's assume we got a member and they're engaged now. When are you guys being triggered? How are you ultimately involved? If let's say a broker has installed this with an employer, when do you guys get involved? How do you find out? PlanSight is a complete game changer in the world of insurance brokering. As a broker,
you know how time-consuming and error-prone the traditional RFP process can be. Well, what if I told you there's a better way? PlanSight is the only end-to-end RFP solution on the market made specifically for benefits agencies. It's like having a superpower that gets you an average of 8 to 10 hours back per employer renewal per year. And the best part? PlanSight supports all carriers, all funding types, and all group sizes for over 20 different benefits. If you're ready to make your RFP process faster, more efficient, and more profitable, it's time to call PlanSight. Visit plansight.com now to book a free demo and discover the future of insurance renewals.
So day one,
Okay.
ultimately all we need is RX claims. We'll pinpoint who those members are that fall under really the disease state and the drugs that we serve. And then we'll begin our outreach to those members that we've identified. And then, so that's day one, beginning anew.
Okay.
As time goes on, it's quarterly outreach. So we review the claims quarterly because they're probably, and maybe or probably is somebody that's been diagnosed since the onset, and now we need to engage with that member too. So it's constant communication, constant monitoring of the RX claims, but really from the employer side, there's no real involvement.
Okay.
Unless they want to be involved. But yeah, I mean, it's just constant outreach and trying to engage those members, letting them know, hey, we're here. We're here to help. This is who we are. This is how we operate. And then really, again, that's when the kind of the hand-holding experience.
Yeah, and so then let's say now you've identified them. I think you said maybe 5 to 10% of members on a
1 to 2%.
Oh, 1 to 2%, excuse me.
Yeah.
So 1 to 2% on a population, right? So let's call it 500. Maybe that's 5 or 10 people might fit into what you do. So we've identified them through the data, the claims data. Now we've gotten triggered. Now there's outreach to the member, correct? So let's assume we go down the path. They say, yep, we're sourcing their drugs. When does the clinician get involved? Like at what step of the
Day one.
Day one. Okay, so they're already involved even if the drug hasn't been alternatively
Correct.
sourced just yet. Okay, cool. And so as they're going through, they're talking how regularly to a member?
Once a month.
Okay.
It's really at the discretion of the member. But once a month is typical.
So in the example with like rheumatoid arthritis or RA, what drug is typical for that? Is that like a Humira?
Humira, yeah.
Okay, so we've sourced Humira less expensively, but now my PharmD clinical coach is guiding me through the process. And so what are some of the lifestyle or some of the kind of behavior stuff that they're looking at in addition to the drug itself?
Yeah, so it's really, and for RA, it's not as much diet, although sometimes, I mean, there's foods that
Maybe bad example. Maybe there's a better example.
Well, no, I mean, I think activity and movement is incredibly important for people with RA. So how can we develop a plan to get them moving when they probably don't want to move because they're in pain, they hurt. They also understand that the drugs make them feel like crap. Humira, for instance, is very tough on the stomach. So what can we maybe eat to help curb that a bit?
Gotcha.
So it's just small little tweaks here and there. And then again, like I said, like just the tiny little baby steps. We're not trying to bring the end goal to them day one and be like, okay, you have to do this, and this. It's one step at a time.
Okay.
Because these people already don't feel well. They need to take their time and get into that point. So
how do you deal with a kind of a semi-resistant person? Let's say they're resistant simply because I feel like crap and I'm just making it through the day is a win for me, right?
Yeah.
So like how do you still find a way for opportunities to have little wins in situations like that where somebody's a little more resistant or hesitant?
I mean, there was one member that her goal was discussed by the PharmD, the coach, just to give up M&Ms as her snack. It was that small.
That small, okay.
And she did. And okay, then what's the next thing we can do? And she's lost quite a bit of weight, which is another benefit, especially if you're dealing with RA. If you are overweight, it's even more stress on your joints.
Okay.
And yes, I mean it's really it depends member to member, patient to patient, but it's just one tiny step at a time.
It's so credible though. To be just having focused attention and have somebody there to sort of counsel and guide them, like finding those little baby steps to take, right?
Yeah.
And those baby steps that over, a previous guest of mine said that 1% every day stacks.
Yeah.
Eventually, if you make 1% incremental changes every day, there's a huge difference if you zoom out and look at a long enough timeline. And I'm sure that holds true in a situation like this.
That's exactly right.
Where does the data side come in though? So the third leg of that stool is really the wearable. And you were telling me over coffee, you kind of pivoted away from the overemphasis on that as the kind of primary thing you do, but it's still an important thing of what you do.
Sure.
So what type of data are you guys collecting from these wearables?
Yeah, so really it's focused on 3 things. Well, really 2, because you can't track diet from a wearable, but it's movement and sleep.
Okay.
So we all know how important that is for everybody, regardless of if you're healthy or you have one of these diseases. But it's kind of an accountability tool, really, because with that wearable, the pharmaceutical or the clinician gets access to that data, and say at their monthly meeting or their monthly review, they'll say, how have you been sleeping? Or how's your exercise been? And they can see right there on their screen whether they're telling the truth or not.
Yeah.
It's a difference in that I think with a normal primary care doc or specialist, those members might see that doctor 2-3 times a year. They're put on the drug, and then it's like, we'll check in a few months and see how you're doing.
And then all their activity is self-reported, right?
Totally. Yeah.
There's no accountability. Yeah.
No, I mean, unless, no, I'm not, this is a blanket statement, but I'd say 9 times out of 10, people aren't fully truthful with that kind of, with their answers there. Like, oh, do you get 8 hours sleep a night? Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, every night.
Yeah, every night. In reality, that's probably not true.
Right.
So it's, again, just that accountability and helping them reach their goals, which, again, the goal is remission.
And what kind of wearables? I think you said Fitbits.
Yeah, Fitbit and Oura Ring.
Or the Oura Ring. You said you guys used to do Apple Watches, but most people just wanted an Apple Watch.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I probably had been the same way. Now, are you providing these to them? Okay.
Yep, no cost.
How's that work? Do you get like kind of wholesale pricing from
we have partnerships with them. And
that's cool.
Yeah. So that's, again, another incentive to get people to jump in, because now they're getting something for free.
Yeah. And then, so where is that data feeding? Like, it's one thing to have it, but where is it going back into a system you built or what? Okay.
Yep. It's going back into a system that we built. They can see it on this dashboard that we created. And then they have access to it as well as the pharmacist.
Yeah, and so the pharmacist is using that data, and that's where the accountability comes in.
Correct.
Like they're reviewing it together. Oh, it looks like you haven't been sleeping as well. What's going on, right? It's giving them some data to dig into.
Yeah.
So modify behavior as a result.
Yeah.
And so what does the long term look like though? So let's say I'm adherent on my medication. I'm working with my coach. I've made some lifestyle changes, and then now I'm just sort of in this sort of maintenance phase, if you will. Or okay, so what are some of the things that over the course of 1 or 2 years that I'm still doing with my coach to make sure I'm deriving additional benefit?
Really, a lot of it is that reporting. I think over time, we want to just ensure that if people have reached remission, they stay there.
Okay.
Again, it varies case by case, but I think once they've reached remission, it's not necessary that they would have to meet with that clinical pharmacist once a month.
Yeah.
They could spread that out and just keep it more of like a regular, quarterly kind of touch point. But it's just monitoring and making sure that you're still really going through those same behaviors that you've picked up over the past year or 2 years.
Yeah, maybe perhaps without some accountability, people might relapse or not be as adherent to their medication, or it's not top of mind anymore.
Right.
But that probably should show up in the outcomes, right, or the way they're feeling, or their movement data and things like that. And then is this for? I guess I didn't even ask this question, but I presume it's self-funded employers, right?
Yeah.
You have to be self-funded. Okay.
Yep.
Is there a kind of a size range of employer that works best, or anything like that?
Really 500 belly buttons and above.
Okay. And what is it about that level that works so well? Is that a rule, or is this?
No, it's. Okay. We can go down to really any self-funded employer, but again, with that percentage, only 1 to 2% of that population really being impacted by these specialty diseases, it makes more sense from our side, because the savings on the pharmaceutical side is much greater when you have more people that are eligible for the plan.
Sure.
So it makes more sense to roll something out. It's not as impactful if you're dealing with one person. The savings just might not justify from the employer side to make a switch to leverage our
Makes
services.
sense. And now, are you typically going, like, you're selling a lot to the broker channel, which we touched on, but I think you said you also work with PBMs too,
Yeah.
right? Like, so how does that work? You in conjunction with another PBM.
So really, it's looking for PBMs that do pass-through rebates, no spread pricing. PBMs that are kind of forward-thinking in their approach and whose values align well with ours. It's difficult on our side to pull away a lot of these medications because of the rebates that are tied to them.
Yeah.
So a lot of the larger PBMs are kind of resistant. So I think it's of the utmost importance to partner with those PBM partners, the smaller ones, that we can really make an impactful change together. Makes for a seamless experience from the employer side. The broker has less of a headache.
Because you're getting like automated feeds and things like that.
Correct. So it's not pulling teeth to try to get the claims data and all that. So
that's the biggest thing. And I've experienced it firsthand. You've obviously experienced it firsthand. When you're in the startup world, when you're selling into consultants, the amount of noise that they have to parse. And I regularly say this. I mean, you said it too. It's impossible for them to know everything that they're supposed to know. So just kind of making sure life is simple for them. The more that these point solutions fragment, and they probably all on their own, if they do what they're supposed to do, they have merit to them.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you can have 100 different solutions in one single employer's plan. It's impossible to manage. And so knowing that you can work well with a kind of that pass-through style PBM to make that experience more seamless, it just makes it a lot easier to bring you guys into the fold. Because again, even one minor impediment or objection to you being involved is, I've got another vendor. Well, boom, that objection goes away at this point. So kind of long, I know you've only been there about 6 months or so, but like the long game here, right? What does the future look like for you guys? What are you hoping to accomplish over the long haul here at Adyptation?
ClaimDoc is a medical claim auditing and member advocacy company. We provide fiduciary services to employer-sponsored benefit plans and allowing them to create an environment where we ensure that the benefit plans are being charged on a fair and reasonable basis.
My business is basically people, and it become a real simple transition. We thought it was going to be far more complex. I've saved, we'll say, hundreds of thousands of dollars. I could not say enough about ClaimDoc.
Yeah, I think two things for me specifically that I'm thinking of. One is identifying really good broker partners.
Okay.
Brokers I call adaptation brokers, and that's individuals inside of a firm, really that are forward-thinking, innovative, wanting to bring new solutions to the clients that they serve. And then, again, I think as equally important is finding those strategic PBM partnerships. I think if we can do that effectively, we can begin to grow at a much faster clip and I think help as many people as we possibly can.
Some of these things too is it takes time, right, to build the infrastructure, to build the software, to understand your messaging, right. Just to find all the pieces that you didn't expect on the front end. And then something becomes like really, really market ready. And so I think that's why you're here. Obviously, that's the fact that you guys have had some traction now. And the market's probably also receptive at this point, right? Like the timing is really good. I know everybody's talking about the CAA. There's a lot of, sort of focus on transparency and pricing, hospital pricing and gag clauses and all these things that have persisted for a long time. There just hasn't been focus. And so now as employers are reacting to that, as consultants are reacting to that, their obligations as fiduciaries and transparency, like all of that's coming to a head where it makes things like this an obvious thing to lean into, right? Become more and more of a no-brainer. So I know it's still early, but maybe we'll zoom out real quick and we'll kind of land the plane here on the podcast. But big picture of healthcare, you've said a couple times that you want to do good. Like the things you want to have impact, you want to have influence, you want to do good in this industry. So what, from a big picture perspective, do you hope to accomplish, man?
I was thinking about kind of that question over the past couple of days. And really for me, it's almost like the Robin Hood effect.
Okay.
There's, because of the rebates and things that are tied to these drugs, and these large corporations that have created, in a sense, a monopoly in the industry, how can we take some of that power away and give it back to the people that we serve?
Yeah.
I think it's of the utmost importance to lead with our value and humility and understanding that these people today these members, these patients that are dealing with whatever the disease is. And again, we focus on one small element. They're being underserved today. And if we can help just one person at a time in a positive way and help them to be well, that's a win.
Yeah.
And if we can get a bunch of those small little wins, we'll be in good
As
shape.
I say, like if you could do it at scale, right, which is really the key. But I mean, I'm with you there too. And I think one of the overarching themes of our discussion over the last couple of hours on and off camera was incentives, right?
Yeah.
Having the proper incentives in place for all parties that everybody benefits from the outcome and nobody is incentivized to act in not a malicious way, but in a way that's selfish, right? Or they're being incentivized based on compensation arrangements that cause them on balance to choose path A versus path B when path A is more towards them and less towards the client themselves, right? And so if we can just shine a light on those things and make it simpler for people to understand that, and then be forthcoming.
Yeah.
This is the way we get paid, and this is why we get paid this way, and this is why my incentives are set up here instead of over here.
Totally.
So I am focused on your client or your patient or your member. They're of the utmost importance to us. And I think if we all sought to do that, right, I think the industry at large would be better. And that's why you and me and a bunch of other people are having these types of conversations publicly. It's just to talk about that openly so that more people are choosing what I would say the quote unquote right behavior to have.
Right.
So why don't we do this, Jack? Closing thoughts, man. I know we covered a lot of ground in 45 minutes or so, but kind of closing thoughts for the folks that have listened thus far.
Yeah, I want people to know that we are a resource that's out there that's maybe a little bit different than what they've heard of before. I think there's help on the clinical side. There's help on obviously the sourcing and the pharmacy side. We're bringing a package to the table that includes both of those elements. And I think there's a lot of good noise around the industry today, like you just mentioned, that people are desperate for something different. So I think you kind of strike while the iron's hot. I think we're sitting in a good spot today, and just looking forward to kind of growing this thing. And again, I sound like a broken record, but just helping people in the best way that we can. So I said, take the next best step from the member perspective, and that's kind of what we want to do as an organization.
Cool. Well, I love it, man. Well, I wish you luck. Obviously, I was excited to get to feature you again. Thanks for coming down from Ohio and telling your story, man. I suspect this won't be the last time we talk, but
Absolutely.
Best of luck to you, man. Go build this. I know it's right now we're shooting. It's in the middle of fourth quarter, so I know it's crazy.
Yep.
This will come out probably at the turn of the year, but I hope you guys do well, man.
Thanks,
and tell everybody I said hello.
I sure will. Appreciate it.
Bye.